The Blue Jackets cleaned up at the end of this year's entry-level draft. Sam McGilligan from sammcgilligan.substack.com will tell you why they cleaned up so well today on Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Hayden Heilshorn. With me in a second is my co-host, Jay Foster. We're here to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of your favorite team and ours, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get going, we want to thank you all for making this your first listen every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, YouTube, and the SiriusXM app. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. NHL draft analyst Sam McGilligan from sammcgilligan.substack.com. We've had him on our show all week. He was on talking about the last few rounds of the Blue Jackets entry-level draft this year and how well they. So we'll kick it to him now.
I had mentioned the Blue Jackets decided to pick another set of teammates. So they picked Whitelaw from the Youngstown Phantoms and then immediately picked his teammate, whose name I have forgotten.
Andrew Strathmann.
Andrew Strathmann. It's fine, I'll edit that out. They picked Andrew Strathmann with their next pick, who hit Whitelaw's teammate in the USHL. So what can you tell me about Strathmann as a player? Because I was not confused by this pick necessarily, but the Blue Jackets have approximately 700 defensive prospects. So...
Well, you guys took 3 forwards to start with. So once you're in the mid rounds, it's like drafting for positional need does not feel like the way to go. If they saw Strathmann as the guy, there's a reason they saw Strathmann as the guy. It might be because for defensive scoring, he was 38 points in 56 games. That's pretty decent. It might be because he put up 102 penalty minutes in 56 games. Because he does that type of stuff. He is a player who I've been greatly enamored with over the years. And I think he went to one of the better teams who could have taken him and done something with him. He is the wildest of wild cards. He wants to be Cale Makar so badly sometimes. And it is awesome and terrifying at the same time. His risk reward balance in his head sometimes is just completely off, and he will go for the riskiest, most holy crap, what the hell was that play, to make like a simple pass he could have just done if he went forehand backhand. But that approach to like blowing the game open with every single touch of the puck, that's what I said earlier about like the instinct to attack that like some players have and others don't, being the difference maker. If Strathmann has anything, it is the instinct to attack and just destroy everything in his path. As a defender, he can be the whole spectrum, from great rush defender with brilliant positioning and good stick work, matches the footwork of his opposition really well, tries to keep them to the outside. He can deny pin, or he can pin guys on the boards. He can box people out from the slot. He can pick up on rotations. These are all things that happen in isolation, but they're all things he can do and have shown clear strength with. He can also just decide that dude needs an elbow to the side of the face and just like or maybe not elbow. That's too dirty. I don't look at him and see him as pure filthy dirty.
Sometimes
like,
he just has the impulsive.
Like
sometimes he just lets the intrusive thoughts win and murders a guy.
Yeah, he is the one. Like the flashy highlight play is what he wants whenever it's possible. So if Strathmann can take somebody's body and send it flying, he will do so. And if he sees the chance where it's like, oh, I can do it here, sometimes he can't. And the guys know he's going to come for them, and they just bait him and just shred him. And he's so far removed from the play that he's not going to do anything for like 3-4 seconds till he's back, which in hockey times is a year and a goal against. And that's a defender, and that's the risk. That's, from what I gathered, some teams were terrified of the notion. Others thought they could rein it in. There were games over the year where Strathmann clearly showed that he can rein it in. The simpler plays were made when it made sense. It also made the flashier plays more effective because they were like, oh, was he just, oh crap, he actually did go for it this time. Like I wasn't ready. Like he blended it when he blends the simplicity and then the rare, like, holy, that was so audacious level play. Then he really starts to become a weapon offensively. Defensively, it's more so just reining him in more so. There's almost no advantage to blowing your positioning for a hit. Actually, there's no advantage to blowing your positioning for a hit. No, whatever you can argue as an advantage still isn't as much an advantage as just maintaining your positioning and boxing guys out to the outside. Like just that type of stuff you can coach, you can work with them. If Columbus took them, they obviously interviewed them, they did game sessions with them, they did the whole process. They're fine with them. They trust them on that side. Nobody takes a defender they do not think can defend in the NHL unless there's some significant upside. So either Columbus sees it as fixable, or Columbus thinks the offensive game, where the risk reward balance is a little, off, to say the least, can be tweaked until everything kind of makes sense. The big complaint with Strathmann, or actually, there is another option because you guys like development, and this is something you just mentioned. If you can bring his skating up, then this turns into a whole different combination, because what limits him right now isn't so much puck skill. He's skilled with the puck. He's not Makar, but he's skilled with the puck, undeniably. And it's not aggression. He almost is like Juracek in that sense, where he's just like endless aggression. I want to be aggressive in every moment I can. It's his skating. He is not a bad skater. He's not the type of skater that he thinks he is in terms of like what plays he tries to make. He is like, he draws guys in towards him, and then he tries to dance around them. And with all the space he creates, there's a wealth of plays he can pull from, each one turning into something dangerous, really getting something going up in transition, all that type of stuff. He does not have the skating for this to work at the next level. He will not escape guys. He will get hit. He won't get crushed. I don't think he's the type to get crushed by bigger players. He's a pretty fierce dude, but he's going to likely just be a turnover machine. He does not have the skating to escape, and he doesn't have the hands to make up for that. The hands are good and the puck control is good. He's not, NHL guys aren't going to fall for them. Not if they know he can't get away. They're going to see what he's going to do to shut him down. He will not be an NHL player in that sense. Likely what happens with him is it's like a combination of everything. The skating gets better, but it doesn't become the world class it needs to be to like make him turn into one of the best defenders from the draft. The defensive game gets improved and the offensive game gets restrained, but in this case that's a good thing because it's already so crazy that the highlights are there. And if all of this all happen, you guys might actually have another NHL player. I don't know what his upside is. It's so weird. It all just depends on the feet. Like it's all based on just every advantage with the tools they can get him is a mandatory for success, basically, in terms of going up the depth chart. He could be a top 4 guy. He's an outside shot of one, but mostly you hear like guys who go in the 4th round. They're like, oh, well, he's got top 4 potential. No, he doesn't. There's a reason he was in the 4th round. It's a lack of tools. It's a lack of something. They just don't think the game like a top 4 guy does. Strathmann wants to be Cale Makar. Cale Makar is the best defenseman in the NHL. That's what Strathmann wants to be. So he already plays like it. It's now taking the chaotic mess that a kid who wants to play like Makar is, because they're drawn more to the flashy side of things, and reining it in. And he so clearly was already on this path this year. I didn't rank him, and the second Columbus took him in top, I was like, he should have still been in my top 64, even if it was at the end of it. I like Strathmann so much. He was such a fun player. There's just very little disadvantage to taking him in the 4th round, and it's all upside. And I'm looking at like other names that went in the 4th round, and it's just very few are more interesting than, like, I'm halfway down. I'm down the whole round. Aaron Manetian went to Dallas. He's equally enticing. Yeah. Luca Pinelli also went into the 4th round. Oh, hey, look at that. Another guy you guys took.
Before we get going and back to our guy, Sam McGilligan, I want to talk to you guys about FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just $20 and you'll land a $200 bonus bet. Win or lose, that's $200 you can spend betting everywhere from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. It's all in an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Please, when you win, you get paid instantly. So go to fanduel.com/lockedon. You'll have a great time. It's a great app. Like I said, it's super safe. It's the first app that I used when gambling became legal here in Ohio. There's no better place to bet Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So sign up today. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get that $200 bonus. That's fanduel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Yeah, I was just about to ask about him.
Oh, and Alex Cernick and Cagnoni. So that's it. That there's 5 players who pop out with upside. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, I was just going to let you run on about Luca Pinelli because Jackets take another center in the 4th round from the Ottawa 67s. This dude under 6 foot, but, again, that doesn't really matter to us. It's just something to point out. He was a point-a-game guy in the OHL last year, but you had eyes on him, or at least probably more than we did. What were you seeing out of this dude?
I like Pinelli a lot. Pinelli is a bit more of a wild card than a guy like Brindley is, or a guy like Stankoven is. He's the smaller type of player as well. Is on the edge where it's like you need to have a certain level of separation and a certain height, basically. It's like if you're like 5'9", you need to be able to separate from NHL level competition without question. You whether it's like somebody like Gavin Brindley just being so smart with everything and having such great feet that he can always avoid the pressure, or someone like Crystal who can use his hands to just manipulate them. Even then, Crystal needs better feet. Pinelli does not have world-class hands. He's still got he's got great skill though, and he's got really, 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 really good skating, but it might just not be enough. And from what I've learned from people who are a bit more privy with the developing skating aspect, whether he can get that skating up is a bit more of a deal breaker with him, because there's some awkwardness to his stride that I guess fixing will undo something else. Or once we get into this stuff, I hand over to the development guys. But for what Pinelli was as an Ottawa 67, he was nothing but fantastic. In terms of OHL effectiveness, he was as effective as any OHLer taken ahead of him. Easton Cowan went at the end of the 1st round. Luca Pinelli was, in my opinion, a far better OHLer this year. He has higher end skill. He has higher end solutions to his problems. He is unbelievably feisty for a guy his size, and really likes to play on thin margins where if he's just slightly off, a bigger guy can send him flying. But he seems to thrive in these environments. Remember at the top prospect game in like February, he just kind of stood out and torched everyone. Like, it was a bit interesting how when it was a best on best competition like that, Pinelli was the one who every shift I was like, oh, hey, look, there's Pinelli again. He's just going. Look at that kid go. I see him and Whitelaw as pretty similar players. If you guys took Luca Pinelli with that pick in the 3rd round, I'd have been like probably singing the same amount of praise as I did with Whitelaw. I like Whitelaw more. I think Whitelaw's tools fare better for him being smaller. And I think Pinelli had some inconsistencies in his game that became a little bit more clear as the year was coming to an end, and I was running on a bit of a good sample of games where some issues weren't showing. But nevertheless, none of it really matters when you're talking about 114th overall. 114th overall is about talent identification and just hoping. That's talent that was very clearly identified and can be a pretty solid player if it all works out. Now it's just kind of up to the hoping and what Columbus can do with them.
Yeah, he was a guy that, again, so I talked to Hadi Kalakesh of Locked On NHL Prospect about specifically Luca Pinelli, and we were talking about potentially taking him at 34th, and he was like, yeah, you could do that, but I think he'll be there at 66th. And then I didn't realize he was still on the board when the Blue Jackets took him, what, 114th? I think it was, and I was like, oh, dang. This is yet another player that I was like, oh, hey, it'd be cool if he was a Blue Jacket, and I guess now he is. Hey, look at that. I've got a fancy draft profile that I did 2 weeks ago, all about him. Go watch that.
We'll have more with Sam McGilligan in just a minute, but first I want to take the time to thank you, the everyday listener, for coming in and listening to Locked On Blue Jackets, either in the podcast version, wherever you get your podcasts, or right here on the YouTube. We thank you guys so much for your contribution to the ongoing discussion about the Columbus Blue Jackets, even in our comments. We love when you guys sound off in our comments. We have some very smart listeners. We know that, and it helps us bring the heat every single day. So we want to thank the everydayer. I know from the Locked On Podcast Network, from other Locked On Podcast Networks, if you find other teams and other shows that you enjoy, also thank you for being a listener there. So from the Locked On Podcast Network, we want to thank the everyday listener for all that you do.
But I think one of the most interesting players in the draft for the Blue Jackets, maybe not the most exciting by a long shot, but the final pick of the draft, Tyler Peddle, who is first of all, great name. Second of all, every prospect, like every scouting report I've read about him, seems confused that he fell that far, but also simultaneously is like surprised that he was drafted at all. So like, what can you tell us about this guy?
Tyler Peddle was undeniably one of the 224 best prospects this year. And if we're using that as the metric of like, should he have been drafted? The answer is yes, he should have been. And that's why he was. Why I definitely didn't think he was going to be drafted. Once it was past like the 5th round, 6th round, I was like, I think there's just going to be other late round swings teams will want to make. Like somebody either had him as like a 4th or 5th rounder, like 1 or 2 teams, and just had the, like, this is the time to take him, or he was probably just going to slip through the cracks. Peddle's interesting because he does a lot of awesome. He's just a really good junior player. Like Luca Pinelli, like I just said, if you're looking at what they were in the OHL this year, he was better than a lot of guys, some of them taken ahead of him. And the same mentality is why he's a higher upside pick, even if it's less likelihood than some of the guys taken ahead of him. Whether this case for Peddle is more up in the air, and that's why NHL teams probably didn't draft them. You don't see any one specific tool where for NHL standards, it's elite. And he doesn't have like in his style of play doesn't overcome that. He's got good hands and he's a solid skater and he just makes plays when they make sense. He doesn't go and dictate pace and dictate the transitional directions, and he's not leading rushes. He's not overly amazing away from the puck because he's a QMJHL player, and that whole league kind of has an issue with playing away from the puck. I mean, Jordan Dumais' strength is playing away from the puck, and you can see what that's doing for his production. Like, there's also just, and people will argue this, the QMJHL is arguably, I'm not going to say arguably the weakest CHL league. It is the weakest CHL league. It's arguably the weakest junior league of all the major leagues in North America. I think the USHL might be better than it. The Q has got like a lot of tactical things that just, what's the way to describe this? There are the Q offers opportunities to players that they're just never going to find, and they probably shouldn't be finding at the major junior level. I watched quite a bit of Q tape last year when doing Jordan Dumais and Nathan Gaucher and a couple of those other players. And when you watched it, or when I was watching it, it became very apparent that guys were able to capitalize on mistakes from the other team. And they had such an advantage doing so that they could create points out of almost nothing. Like, they didn't actually do anything, but one defender just chased a guy out of the slot for no reason. Another defender was already like 3 feet to the left where he should be, and the center wasn't paying attention and rotated the wrong way. And now the slot is uncontested, and a guy goes, "Oh, my teammate's there!" Whoop, and gets the primary assist. And it's like, it looks awesome because a bunch of movement happened all at once, and the whole time their guy was stick handling, but their stick handling didn't actually do anything. They could have just held the puck and just whoop, like that, and the play would have happened the same way. Moral of the story is QMJHL is wilding off the puck. They're just like, I don't know what they're doing sometimes. Some teams, this is not the case for all teams. Like, you can tell watching Halifax. I'm going to say them because Dumais. But, like, there's a reason why Dumais thrives in Halifax. And there's a reason why he thrives in leagues. He's just smart. Like, he would be doing well in other CHL leagues too. I'm still not sure about the projectability of everything. And I'm still not sure if the production warrants the hype. But at the same time, it's like, I don't even care. I just want to see how it plays out. Going back to Tyler Peddle. Peddle is a player who is just really good at capitalizing off these things, and he still made stuff happen, but nothing so to the point where, like, I can also see that working against NHL defenses. Like, he's got to get more skilled. He's got to get faster. The strength comes with, as it does with every player, because they're not fully grown yet. He's a long shot, but at this point of the draft, past like the 4th round, they're all long shots.
So who isn't a long shot at 224th overall?
I haven't seen all the players drafted. I haven't seen a lot of the players who were drafted in the later rounds. And I have been talking to people who have gone back and viewed some of them. The general theme is, this dude is terrible. He only got drafted because he's big. And that seemed to run rampant, like, all the way through a lot of the 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks. Just big and does like one thing kind of decent, and they're just hoping he maybe one day becomes a role player out of it. If that's the case, Peddle's much more exciting than all of them. Peddle has more to offer, and Peddle's likely also a role player at best, but he's a bit more of an interesting one than just drafted because big. Beyond that, there isn't a whole lot to say about Tyler Peddle, I think. I think it's easy to start describing his game. If I was to describe parts of his game, it sounds a lot like how I'd have described Brindley or Whitelaws or something like that. And I think it's important to state that, like, that's not what he is, because the tools aren't on the same level as that of Whitelaws or Pinelli's or Brindley's or obviously Fantilli's or any of them. And usually that, even if you're smart enough or you're just good at, you can be a good hockey player, but the NHL requires more than just being a good hockey player. It's the best ones in the world. Peddle is good enough to probably be a solid AHLer and play pro elsewhere if he wanted to. And maybe a couple NHL games come his way one day. Maybe he plays just as a body to fill in, or he finally gets his chance after like a 6-year journey or something. But it's not a pick where I think people are going nuts for it. I mean, every year there's a couple of guys from the Q who get the public hype train that just don't end up going in the draft. I liked Peter Reynolds like many other a few years ago, and then Peter Reynolds never won the draft. And nobody's talking about Peter Reynolds anymore. And there's probably because, you know, he's not drafted and there's a reason for it. And that almost was the story for Tyler Peddle. But at the last minute, Columbus was like, nope, giving him a little bit more of a chance. So it'll be fun to see how that one goes.
I fully agree. It'll be fun to see how it goes. I got nothing else for you, Sam. I mean, I would ask why Michigan hasn't won a national title, yet with all those first round draft picks that they just, rip in and out, and still, the trophy case is a little dusty, but I guess they've won some Big Ten titles. That's cool. Good for them. I'm an Ohio State fan, if you can't tell. So, but yeah, Sam, honestly, man, appreciate the inside info.
Not at all.
I mean, you've given us a great inside look into all these guys, and gosh, I hate that it's the middle of July right now. Or I hate that July just started, because we got the Blue Jackets have a future. Yeah,
so long until hockey.
I know. Yep. Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me, because I very much enjoyed this. I think you guys absolutely killed this draft, and at every pick that was happening, I was like, man, if I'm talking about any team, I'm talking about Columbus. So like this,
I did get a lot of Sam and I talked a lot throughout the draft, and it was mostly just us like key smashing at each other and just saying yo over and over. But
like just everyone.
If people want to, catch up with prospect of their own teams, if Blue Jackets fans want to learn more about, let's say Gavin Brindley, where can people find you and your work online?
The usual. So at Sam_McGilligan for Twitter. And then for the rankings post that I did and a couple other things, if you just want to kind of see what my thought process was when putting a list together, that's all found at sammcgilligan.substack.com. I do this thing where I make a pick every time Montreal makes a pick. I've been doing this since 2020. And I have a piece coming out that's kind of reflecting on 4 drafts. Now that I've made it to 4, it feels like that's a decent sample where I can start looking at it like, hey, what is the process and why? So I've been working on that, and it'll be coming out some point in the next couple of weeks. I don't want to say when, because the draft is over. And I'll be honest, I'm taking time away from this stuff because this was exhausting. The last 2 months of the draft year are mentally taxing. Not even for like the work ethic, just reading everyone going, that's not even what is any of this? It's just people talking. They've never seen them before. So yeah, I don't want to do that. But beyond that little side tangent, that piece will be coming out probably within 3 weeks or so, and comparing it to the actual Montreal picks and stuff. So if you're ever looking forward to inside process of why someone makes the decisions they do, that'll be there. Beyond that, it'll most likely be a quiet summer as all of us prospect geeks are like
sleeping,
winding down. This is hibernation season.
Cool. Well, yeah, like I said, we appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure we'll have you back soon enough.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks.
That's all we have for you today. Next week, plenty of conversation about our guy, Kirill Marchenko. We're going to do his season review. That should be very, very exciting. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for making this your first listen every day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, YouTube, and the SiriusXM app. I'm Hayden Heilshorn. You can find me on Twitter at HaydenH971. You can find Jay on Twitter at _Jacob Foster. And you can also find the show on Twitter at LO_Blue Jackets. You can also email the show at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.